Hey guys, it's Devine here from merge.com. In the first part I talked about the similarities between RS and Bitcoin merching. I put the link to that video in the description, but in the second part I'd like to focus on the differences and also some fundamental problems with RS merching. Of course there are endless differences, but I'll just focus on the ones you know from RS here, or I'll be talking for a few hours. First off, the most obvious thing, Bitcoin is not a game. You actually invest money into it, so you have to be a lot more cautious. There are definitely merchants who bought their gold in RuneScape, but most people made it from scratch and thus only lose time and not their savings if anything goes wrong. Like I said in the first video, you really have to do your research before getting into Bitcoin. An important difference is the fact that Bitcoin is one thing, while RS has thousands of items you can merchant. There are also other cryptocurrencies, sometimes almost identical to Bitcoin, sometimes slightly different. And despite them being worth only a fraction of it, their price movements have been following Bitcoin very accurately thus far. So if Bitcoin crashes, they do too, which doesn't make them an interesting thing to hop onto if Bitcoin isn't doing well. It's kind of like with party ads, for example. If purple and yellow party ads are crashing, it's usually pretty stupid to invest your cash in green or red party ads, since they will likely do the same, or they probably at least won't go up. Instead, you would more likely invest your cash into another market, for example in weapons and armors, which often have a decent chance of rising when discontinued items crash. On RS, moving into another market and following the cash flow is very easy and predictable, but in real life there are simply immense amounts of markets where the money can go to. Some people often put a link between Bitcoin and gold prices doing the opposite thing, but this isn't always true because there are simply more factors at play and more markets out there. Next up, one of my favorite differences. On Bitcoin exchanges you can see exactly what offers are in at what price, whereas on RS, the closest we ever got to that were the live graphs emerged that were updated every few minutes through in-game price checkers. Other than that, we've simply been blind to what offers are in at any time. An RS merchant would immediately think it's horrible if everyone knew this because of under and overcutters. But for Bitcoin, it actually works because of the next difference: a minimum trading fee on exchanges. This fee is the way for exchanges to make their money and to stop people from high frequency trading for tiny amounts. An example of it on BTCE here, I can see all the buyers and sellers at any time. It is a really massive amount, which means the price can be very volatile. This makes consistently flipping Bitcoin for a few cents too risky, as you can just as easily lose that and more in a sudden price movement. There are also no limits on Bitcoin merchanting, whereas on RS you're always stuck with the annoying limit for 4 hours, and if you only have one account then you have 6 grand exchange slots, all with a max cash limit. Now this would make you think that people would simply park a lot of cash on an exchange at fixed prices and consistently flip Bitcoins for a small amount of profit. The problem with that is that even thousands of Bitcoins is nothing here, and people will easily buy you out within minutes or even seconds if they want. The only people that could truly do this are multi-millionaires and billionaires who are not interested in games like that in the end, but much more in long-term growth. You also have to keep in mind that if they kill trading by stabilizing it so much, it will put off day traders, which would make the prices drop due to a decrease in demand and an increase in supply. It is not in anyone's best interest to do something like this, in case you are having any fantasies about it. Another important difference is the transparency. Anyone can see the core code that operates the Bitcoin network. This is also why there are so many other cryptocurrencies, which are often altered copies hoping for a similar success. Bitcoin is completely open source and transparent, whereas on RS the players had to put together a few basic rules like buy limits that were set every 4 hours, items with linked limits, and some approaches on item drop rates and what it takes for the Grand Exchange to update, for example. Probably the most important thing that was figured out was the margin versus the time of the day graph, which Snow put together based on months of price checking data. It's in an old merge class from a long time ago. Anyways, my point is, all of this was done by players. None of it was given by Jagex other than the top 100 volume items, which also cannot be broken down or properly examined or anything. On RS, we don't know how many offers there are in, we don't know how much money there is in the exchange or even in the game, what prices people are buying at is unknown, we don't know with certainty what it takes for an item's met price to update, what the volumes on all items are, and so on. With Bitcoin you know it all. You can even see all the Bitcoin transfers that were ever done on the blockchain, which is the database on the Bitcoin network that lists all of the transactions. This makes it very different from RS, where we're pretty much left in the dark for the most part, because Jagex doesn't appreciate merchants, unfortunately. despite us being a large amount of the player base anyways. At the same time, it probably wouldn't be very practical if the Grand Exchange worked in a similar way to the Bitcoin network, because we have limits. If all limits were taken away, it could be very successful. The market would definitely be a lot more volatile, but it would also be a lot of fun. The next difference is the fact that Bitcoin is still in its baby shoes, like the internet once was, and it will evolve a lot over the next few years to become more user-friendly, more accessible, more secure and advanced. But the problem is that on RS, we're pretty much facing a finished product for years now. Other than messing around with item limits, adding new items and changing the design ones, the RS Grand Exchange has pretty much been the same for 7 years now. It is unlikely that this will ever change, at least for the better, because Jagex is not interested in its merchanting community and they just really want people to play and enjoy their game. A longer Grand Exchange history has been requested many times, for example, but it would be an easy and nice addition that Jagex just never really cared to add. And this ultimately brings me to the last difference. On RS, Jagex has almost complete power over the game economy in the end, which puts us merchants at their mercy. There are certain things they can do, of course, or they would lose too many players, but they have interfered many times now, ranging from manually forcing the price of an item down, to changing item limits, to making posts on a website, telling people not to panic sell items, if anyone remembers that one. Jagex just wants the RS economy to be healthy in their eyes, whereas with Bitcoin, basically anyone can massively influence it if they want. If you want to buy $1 million worth of Bitcoins right now, the network isn't going to tell you that's not allowed. They might overcut, like other people might overcut you, but they cannot stop you. You can do with your money what you want. And that's not the case on RS. If the price of Bitcoin crashes very deep tomorrow, you won't see exchange owners making announcements to hold on to them for better times and stuff. They might write a post like explaining how they see the future of Bitcoin, but they're not going to tell you to hold on. You also won't see them add a limit of Bitcoin that you can trade per day to their exchange or something like that, as it's counterproductive and it would make a bunch of people go to another exchange. Jagex basically has a monopoly, whereas Bitcoin is more like an oligopoly. Jagex doesn't abuse their monopoly position, but at the same time they are simply not improving the product and often restricting it instead. That personally bothers me most about RS merchanting, and if anything is going to drive me away from it eventually, it will probably be that. That sums up this video, I suppose, about the differences. I hope you enjoyed these two somewhat different from the usual videos. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below as usual. I'll be responding to all of you. Take care, guys, and have a great week. Next week there will be another video.